making decisions on who's in the cabinet, saying things like abolish the Federal Reserve, calling himself first buddy, does raise some concerns. Let's just be honest about that. First of all, Musk can feed Trump's taste for conspiracy. His misleading election claims have been viewed more than 2 billion times on X, according to one analysis. And while Musk's desire for things like a slimmed down government could have positive impact for sure, his role is beginning to have the potential to be crony capitalism, be uncomfortable, or the type of political oligarchy we see in Russia, where Putin rewards his wealthy oligarchs like Oleg Deripaska with valuable contracts. Kristen Holmes begins our coverage tonight. She is live in Washington. And Kristen, you have new reporting tonight about this room where Musk and Trump are, this war room that's been set up at Mar-a-Lago, where Trump and Musk and others are picking the new team. What have you learned?
Yeah, Aaron, this is a room that really caters to the president-elect, which means a lot of TV screens and a lot of information. I am told that these are long tables and rooms that have been quartered off inside Mar-a-Lago with curtains, although I was told by one member they were able to make eye contact with the former President-elect Trump at one point, so maybe not as private as they think. However, they are really giving Donald Trump, as one senior advisor called it, a 360 view of every candidate, and there is a reason for that. The reason being that Donald Trump told people around him, one, he wants to be completely involved in the process, and two, that there was some embarrassing moments in 2016, 2017 when he would make a public backing for a particular candidate or a potential pick, and then learned later that this person had said a number of negative things about him behind his back. They're trying to avoid what one advisor said was any surprises. Donald Trump does not want to have anything that alarms him. So what this room looks like is essentially you have these TV screens that have the pictures, the bios of each of these candidates, but they also are playing tightly edited clips of each of these candidates. One thing that Donald Trump cares a lot about is television presentation. Can this person present in a way that is receptive or able to be received by outsiders? Is this somebody who can communicate my message? And that's one thing that they're looking for. And not all of these TV clips or podcast clips are positive. Some of them have the negative things that people have said about Donald Trump or the more critical things, but it is just one indication of just how seriously they are taking this process and just how involved the president-elect is this time around compared to what we saw in 2016.
Right. Although interesting in that context, how fast and furiously all these appointments are coming out, even with all of that, as you report. All right, Kristen, thank you very much with all of those new details. General Wesley Clark is out front now, 4-star general, former NATO commander, and former presidential candidate. And General, I have a lot to ask you about this evening as a 4-star general. You heard Kristen's reporting, though, first on Elon Musk and the power that he has been getting increasingly in Trump's inner circle, by Trump's side, weighing in on major decisions. On that call with Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, which they said was a short social call, but it just shows the influence and the presence that he has. Does that concern you at this time at all?
Look, this is entirely the prerogative of President Trump. The American people elected him. He's responsible to the American people for his performance in office. He has unparalleled power by virtue of the Supreme Court, the Senate, and probably the House of Representatives. And he's going to run the government the way he wants. And that's democracy.
Well, and you also, I guess you're referring, in a sense that it's not just the Supreme Court's composition, but the immunity ruling, although I know that's still being sorted out for sure. But when it comes to this transition team, the Wall Street Journal reporting, Vivian Salama, that they are reportedly considering an executive order to create what they're calling a warrior board, General, to be able to fire 3- and 4-star generals that Trump doesn't like. Now, of course, he's got the authority to fire generals. That comes with the territory. He could do that. You're a 4-star general. You knew that. But many respected people, former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, are raising concerns, really saying this board could amount to what he was referring to as really a vigilante hit team. Do you have worries like that?
Sure. I mean, I'd like to see what the criteria are. If you don't like diversity training in the armed forces, just say there'll be no diversity training. If people in the armed forces insist on it, then they either follow the order or they leave. If you think certain generals didn't perform their duties in the Afghanistan evacuation, which is one of the items carried in the Wall Street Journal article, do an investigation. But remember, when you're looking at the actual performance of generals in complex operations, you got to look above the generals because they're taking from the policy level. So it's not always the general's decision that leads to the bad outcome. And then if you simply don't like these generals, what are the criteria? What's it based on? And I think that's remaining to be defined. When President Trump says a rogue general or in response to a question, what is that exactly? There's a selection process in the armed forces. These people have all been vetted numerous times at each level of promotion. Someone has said they're very competent. So if there's going to be a review of their record, then let it be a review, publish the criteria, and let's look at it. Remember, the diversity training was put in the armed forces for the benefit of the performance of the armed forces. I was part of that armed forces in Vietnam, where there was a lot of racial unrest, and there were incidents, and there were a lot of problems. We put in the equal opportunity human relations training in the 1970s. Some people let it lag. Some of it's been put back in.
Yeah.
It's really about the effectiveness of the armed forces. So that's what your ultimate criteria should be.
Right. Well, effectiveness. And of course, we don't, to your point, we don't know. And maybe that's the whole point of a board like this, that there would be no transparency or accountability on that. But it is that sort of the checking the boxes and knowing that has made the U.S. military so great, that transparency that exists. It does come, General, on the context of CNN's reporting that the Pentagon is bracing for Trump to call up troops possibly inside the United States to use, for mass deportations. He's talked about this. So the Pentagon has met to talk about what that would mean. Do you think they're right to prepare for such a scenario?
Well, first of all, if they are preparing for it, it's under the direction of the current Secretary of Defense and the chain of command. Secondly, if it's a legal order, if the order is issued, it's going to be checked for legality. If it's a legal order, then they're obligated to obey it. If they choose not to, then they either they resign from their positions, or they could be court-martialed for refusing to obey a legal order.
All right. Well, General, I appreciate your time. Thank you so very much, General Wesley Clark. As I said, 4-star general,
Thank you.
Former commander of NATO. Thank you. And also breaking tonight, President-elect Trump choosing Mike Huckabee for the job of U.S. ambassador to Israel. Now, this is a decision that would have huge ramifications. And we have a very different view on policy, what Huckabee's put forward, than any other ambassadors, so publicly, who have served in that role. K-File tonight is revealing that Huckabee said, quote, "There's really no such thing as a Palestinian." Never mind a state. Huckabee making extensive comments on this topic when he was running for president in 2008. And Andrew Kaczynski of K-File joins me now. In the context of the war and the fears that it could become a much, much bigger war, this reporting is so crucial. What more do you know about what Mike Huckabee has said?
Right, and this nomination of Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel, this is a extremely hawkish pick by President-elect Trump. He has a track record of highly polarizing comments on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These views go back years, with him repeatedly questioning the legitimacy of a Palestinian state on the border with Israel. He has said that if a Palestinian state were to be created, it should be not created where it is now. It should be created with land from the neighboring countries, Syria, Jordan, Egypt. He even described the Palestinian identity in one of the clips he found as, quote, "a political tool to try and force land away from Israel." Now, I first obtained these comments we're about to hear when he ran for president in 2016. Just take a listen to them right now.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset. There's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not. Arabs and Persians, you don't have, and there's such complexity within that. There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel.
I mean, just obviously hugely significant. You're talking about he would, if anything, take land from neighboring countries. Obviously, the clear implications there would be for Israel to annex the West Bank, which is obviously seismic, if true. Andrew, obviously, this isn't the only time Huckabee has talked about this issue. I mean, this is an issue that he feels is deeply personal.
That's right. That's right. He takes trips to Israel. This goes back all the way, to 2008, where we played that initial clip from, but this is a position that he has consistently had. It is far from the only time that he has said it. He has said consistently that he opposes a two-state solution. He has said, quote, "There's plenty of land outside Israel and the rest of the world for a Palestinian state." Take a listen to him going a little bit further on that in 2015.
The two-state solution, if we mean two governments holding the same piece of real estate, is irrational and unworkable. If there is a two-state solution, the Palestinian state needs to be outside the boundaries of the nation of Israel. There's plenty of land in the world that we could find a place and say, okay, let's create a Palestinian state.
So we did reach out to Huckabee personally. We reached out to the Trump transition, and we asked them if he stood by those comments. We didn't hear back from either of them. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out, especially with the conflict that's going on right now in Gaza.
Oh, certainly, and raises questions of the voters and the voters who had voted for Jill Stein as an opposition to Kamala Harris. So they may feel about what
And some of them even voted for Trump as well.
And some of them even voted for Trump. And this is, this is what you would have thought Trump, this is consistent with the words that they've put out before. All right, Andrew, thank you very much, and hugely significant to hear that there. And now we've got some more breaking news, just as Andrew and I were speaking. Former President Trump just announcing he's tapping Pete Hegseth, a Fox News host, to be the next Defense Secretary of the United States. I want to go back to Kristen Holmes. So, Kristen, what more are you learning about this one?
Yeah, Aaron, I mean, this really goes to some of what we were just talking about, which is Donald Trump really wanting people who can put forward his message on television, and he likes the way that Pete performs. Now, I do want to note that Pete Hegseth has a very long record in the military. He was an Army combat veteran. He served both in Afghanistan and Iraq, and this is what we got from a statement from Donald Trump. He said, "Pete has spent his entire life as a warrior for the troops and for the country. He is tough, smart, and a true believer in America first. With Pete at the helm, America's enemies are on notice. Our military will be great again, and America will never back down." Then he goes a little bit into his biography. I will tell you a couple things. I talked to a number of advisors in the last few minutes as this was unfolding. They said this. They said that, one, Pete has been an informal advisor to the former president, now president-elect, for a number of years. He did that while he was in office. He did it while he was out of office. The other thing I learned is that he was considered for a number of positions back in 2016, eventually got passed over. Now, obviously, he is going to serve as Secretary of Defense. This is a critical role for the former president, now president-elect, in this administration. We know that, for example, Mike Walls was somebody who was also up for this job. Obviously, he is now going to be the national security advisor. This kind of rounds out, or at least adds to, this level of who is going to be serving at the Pentagon, intelligence, and foreign policy.
All right. Well, Kristen, thank you very much. And in context of the reporting just out there, that this warrior board that Trump is looking at potentially by executive order will remove 3- and 4-star generals he doesn't like. What Andrew was just reporting from K-File about the nominee for ambassador to Israel saying that there's no such thing as a Palestinian, just puts the influence, the crucial nature of the Secretary of Defense position in stark light. And that, of course, will be Pete Hegseth from Fox News. That is the nominee for this president. Well, next, Trump tapping Governor Kristi Noem, one of his biggest defenders. She will run one of the country's biggest agencies as well. So is she qualified for that job? Plus, he's the new mayor of one of the most liberal cities in America. How he won his race, sometimes sounding like a Republican. And officials now sounding the alarm inside the Pentagon. New satellite images tonight showing China is fast-tracking plans to build a nuclear reactor for military use.